Hello again, this is episode number 2 of Road Noise, 40 plus years of dreaming. Do not judge me just because I finished off a triple scoop of mint chocolate chip ice cream from Baskin-Robbins right before I began recording this podcast episode. It doesn't mean I'm not on my diet. It just means I've taken a break for this particular trip. Well, not even for this particular trip, for this particular, this commute from point A to point B. I'm once again in Alabama, about to cross over into the Georgia line, but I'm going to go straight through Georgia into South Carolina. I'm heading on an 8-hour commute from Carbon Hill, Alabama to Conway, South Carolina, and Conway's right outside of Myrtle Beach. It seems like I might have talked to you about Conway before. I can't remember. But anyway, that's where I am. If you're a first-time listener and you hear the noise of the road under my voice, that's because that's exactly what it is. The noise of the road. I am recording this podcast as I commute from place to place on my job. And that's what Road Noise is all about. It's a life journal. It's my life journal, things that I think about while I'm on the road, and because I'm by myself all the time and things go through my head, I said, hey, why don't I commit them to audio? And if there's one person out there who likes to hear the stuff that I talk about, then it's worth it because I enjoy doing this anyway. So I'm doing this for me, I'm doing this for you, and I hope there are a whole lot of yous out there eventually listening to this podcast. So what do I want to talk about today? Well, I was thinking today earlier as I was etching a stone of a young man who was into a lot of different things. The stone had a collage of things from his life. There was a picture of him running the football on his high school team. There was a picture of him wearing a title belt that he had won from MMA fighting. There was also a picture at the top of him welding. So there were different things about this young man's life that was being recognized on the stone that I was etching. And it got me to thinking about my own life. 40 plus years worth of dreaming. And the more I started thinking about it, I decided, let me see if I can go back how far I can go back that I remember having a goal, having a dream, something that I wanted to do. If you ask any kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? You're going to get all sorts of answers. You'll get the standard stuff. Doctor, maybe one really intelligent kid might say lawyer, a cowboy, astronaut, things like that. You hear from children all the time. And so I knew that I should be able to go back to my childhood, and then I thought it would be interesting to see how much detail I could document of the ways my dreams of what I wanted to be when I grew up changed throughout the years. And I really became astonished when I started putting this list together because it's so different, and it went back and forth on a couple of things, and it went into my adulthood from at least things that were different from where I am now as a business owner and an etcher. But it is also neat to see how more mature the ideals of things that I wanted to do as a career became the older I got, and how they would be different from one time to the next, 180 degrees from each other. So I thought this would be an interesting thing to talk about. And I titled this podcast, 40 Plus Years of Dreaming. So let's just jump right into it. And I started, and I went, and I have no way of knowing whether or not the ages that I'm about to represent are accurate, but they're in the ballpark, so just bear with me there. But I remember the furthest back that I can go that I remember knowing that I wanted to do something specifically when I grew up would be about the age of 7. So at 7 years old, I'm imagining myself in the little country neighborhood that I grew up in on my bicycle. Because that's what I did when I was a child, when I wasn't in school, whether I was out of school or for the afternoon or out of school for the summer. I was on my bike. And I can remember specifically we loved to set up a ramp and jump it and see how high we could jump and see what things we could jump over and how far we could go. Whenever we would get a new bike, my mom, the first thing she would say was, "Do not let me catch you making a ramp to jump." And we would, of course, say, "Yeah, Mom, sure." And then what would we do? The very first thing we would do was go find some bricks and a board and make a ramp. Because that's what you did with a bike. You jumped ramps. And we had ditches that ran along the front of our yards, and we would set a ramp up in front of the ditch. I do remember a couple of times jumping a ramp, and one specific time falling into the ditch. I didn't clear the ditch, and I fell into it, and all I remember is bright white pain, and my foot, by the time I didn't really pass out, but by the time I kind of could collect myself, my foot was buried in the spokes of the back wheel, and my sister had to help me get my ankle and foot out of the spokes of the back tire. I don't know how my foot ended up in the back tire of the bike, but it did, and that was painful. So what I'm getting around to is the very first time I remember someone saying, "What would you like to be when you grew up, or when you grow up?" I said, "Professional stuntman." I was sure when I was a kid that I was going to grow up to be a professional stuntman because that's what I love to do. I love to jump ramps. I love to ride fast. I love to climb trees, and I love to see how far I could jump. Anything that you can imagine a child that would grow up to be a professional stuntman. And let's face it, most boys that grow up anywhere in the world, we all have that same kind of desire to just see how far we can go, see how high we can jump, see what kind of crazy things we can do to drive our parents crazy with worry. I wanted to be a professional stuntman when I grew up, and that's the very first one I remember at about 7 years old. And the inspiration for that, I can tell you right now. I grew up in the 70s, or late 70s, early 80s. The Dukes of Hazzard. Bo Duke and Luke Duke jumping in the General Lee. And every episode, that car would jump a ramp. It would get airborne somehow. I can't remember what the number was, but somewhere along the lines, I heard a stat that talked about the number of cars they went through. I think it was a Dodge Charger. Was it a Dodge Charger? That was the General Lee? I can't remember. I think it might have been a Dodge Charger. Anyway, they went through tons and tons of those cars because in the show, they would get airborne and they would land and continue getting away from Boss Hogg and Roscoe P. Coltrane. But in real life, they tore up an enormous amount of cars filming that show, and I loved it. I think it was Friday nights. I can't remember for sure, but I think Friday nights was when it came on because my cousin would come over to the house. His family would come over to our house on Friday nights, and we would sit in front of the television and watch the Dukes of Hazzard, and we wanted to be Bo and Luke Duke. And so when I got my bike, that's what went through my mind. I was Bo Duke. Actually, I was Luke Duke most of the time. My cousin, when we would play it together, he was always tougher than me, and he had to be the leader every time, no matter what we did, whether it was Batman and Robin. He was Batman, I was Robin. When we played Dukes of Hazzard, he was Bo Duke, I was Luke Duke. But it was all right. But that was all right because I was one of the Duke boys, and that was my inspiration. That's what made me want to be a stuntman. So at 7 years old, thereabouts, I can imagine stuntman was what I wanted to be. And I do remember, I have a vivid memory of being on my bike one day, and I don't know who it was, but somebody saying, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Or me just making the aversion of when I grow up, I'm going to be a professional stuntman. So moving on in years, I remember being about in 4th or 5th grade. I went to a concert with my sister. Well, my whole family. I ended up falling asleep in the concert, but it was for my sister, I think for her birthday. My sister was obsessed with Rick Springfield in the early 80s. Love Is All Right Tonight, Jesse's Girl. I think the album was called Working Class Dog. My sister had the big LP, and she played it all the time. We knew all the music by heart, and Rick Springfield came to the Greenville Memorial Auditorium in Greenville, South Carolina. And my family got tickets to see the show. I'd never been to a concert, neither had my sister. And so we went to see Rick Springfield. Well, from that moment on, at about the ballpark of 10 years old, because I knew I could sing, I'd been singing for a long time by then, I decided rock star. That's for me. Forget the stunt devil. Forget the professional stuntman stuff. I'm going to be a rock star. And I remember telling my then girlfriend, I'm going to be a rock star on the stage, giving those concerts just like Rick Springfield. And I was obsessed with that for quite a while. I'll never forget that concert event because my sister, I want to say, climbed up on the shoulders of some stranger she had never seen. She was down on the floor, and the rest of the family was up in the seats, and we were kind of up and to the left of the concert stage. So my sister couldn't see. She's always been sort of short, and some guy she'd never met before put her up on his shoulder so she could see, and she just was on cloud nine for that entire concert. I went to sleep. But it didn't matter. I had still seen the concert. I still have some vague flashes of memory from it, and just wanted to be a rock star. And that urge will pop up in later years as what I want to be, but not before there are several more things that I decided that I was going to be along the way. Like, at about 14 years old, I went from wanting to be a rock star to wanting to be a mercenary / ninja. A mercenary / ninja. If you'll recall, in the 80s, there was a rash of ninja movies. Sho Kosugi was a ninja master, supposedly, who made all of these ninja movies. And we young boys got obsessed with those, and we all wanted to be ninjas. Add to that the popularity of Sylvester Stallone in the role of Rambo, and you've got mercenary / ninja, and that's what I thought I wanted to be. I got all into the military stuff. Now, my dad retired from the National Guard, so I had all of this military access of cool stuff that he had, and he would get me Army surplus stuff, and he'd bring it back, and I had all this really cool stuff, and so when you put on the, well, let's just say it, costume, and you feel like Rambo, I remember specifically my dad, if you'll remember, I want to say it might have been Rambo 2, First Blood Part 2. There was a poster or an image of Sylvester Stallone bare-chested with these belts of bullets crisscrossed on his chest. There were bullets held together by clips, and they made a belt. And as he would shoot the gun, it fed up into the gun, and he had them crisscrossed over his chest to, well, supposedly because that was the best way to carry them, but it was just because it looked cool on the movie poster. But my dad brought me and my stepbrother some clips like that with spent Army rounds. The rounds weren't live. There weren't even projectiles in them. And they were just casings. But they still fit into the clips, and it was so cool to have those. There weren't many kids who did. So you would put those on, and all of a sudden you were Rambo. I also had the hunting knife with the serrated top, so you could saw things, and I had toy guns that looked like the real thing. I really wanted to be Rambo and Sho Kosugi all in one. I was going to be the ultimate mercenary ninja, and that was at about 14 years old. I was a teenager, and I really got into that. I started putting Army posters up, and I wanted to be a Green Beret. Anything that sounded cool, I decided I wanted to be a part of that. So, military, mercenary / ninja. That was about 14 years old. But as is the way with teenagers, you flip-flop quite a lot. And as I developed into a teenager, it went back and forth. So from age 14 at mercenary / ninja, at age 15, thereabouts, I got into reading articles by Louis Grizzard. Some people may recognize the name Louis Grizzard. Some people will say, who? Louis Grizzard was a humor columnist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he would write, I think it was a daily column, and he was funny, and he was despised by a lot of people, and he was adored by a lot of people. I just thought he was funny, and he was a Southern humorist who talked about the Southern way of life, and he was very opinionated, and he'd been married several times and divorced several times, and he was just a funny guy. And his columns, he would put them together into books, and he wrote a couple of books that weren't columns as well, but they were always humor. And having a personality where I love to laugh and I love to make people laugh, that appealed to me. So for a while there, at about 15 years old, I was reading everything by Louis Grizzard I could get my hands on, and I decided I wanted to be a humor columnist or journalist just like him. And so at about age 15, I began to sit at the computer. My stepdad, this was in the early days where everybody didn't have a home computer, but we did because my stepdad was a computer programmer, and so we had very basic home computers, or a very basic home computer. And I had an early word processing program that I would sit down, and still to this day, I do believe that I don't have them. I believe my stepdad does. Somewhere on some sort of floppy disk or something, the early writings of Michael Blackston, where I tried to be a humor columnist at age 15. And it hasn't been too awful long since I looked at some of that stuff and thought, oh my goodness, I can't believe this was me. And that was almost 30 years ago. And it was, I'm just going to tell you, it was bad. So it didn't take me very long to decide that that wasn't for me. I've always had writing in the back of my mind, though, because I always knew I could write if I took the time to do it. So writing will come again into play at a later time. But at about 16 years old, I changed my mind again. Why? Because I became the lead singer of Midnight Run. We all decided, after we formed the historic, amazing band Midnight Run, that we would grow our hair out like Van Halen and Dokken and Poison and all of those hair bands that we were listening to religiously and covering their music. I decided I wanted to be a rock star again. So from about age 10, 6 years later, here I am wanting to be a rock star again, because I am officially the lead singer of Midnight Run. That didn't last very long. Midnight Run, actually, we weren't that bad a band for a high school band. The only problem with Midnight Run is they began to start wanting to, as the band started getting together and getting a little tighter, started wanting to play bars and stuff like that. And I wasn't, at 16 years old, I had no interest in playing bars. And so I quit the band, and they went on and did a few things, and I think they stayed together for a couple of years maybe, and then disbanded, as all high school, not all, but most high school bands do. And thus ended my wanting to be a rock star at age 16, because at 17 years old, I decided, wait a minute, I've got it. I know what I want to do with my life. I love making people laugh, but it's not as fun writing as it is actually telling jokes. And since I like to watch Saturday Night Live every Saturday night, and I love to watch comedians on this new channel called the Comedy Central Network, I think it was out by then. Yeah, because I was about 17. I was watching Comedy Central all the time. What did I want to do? I knew that I had found my lot in life. I was going to be a stand-up comedian. I had been performing truly nearly all my life. By the time I was 17, I had done my first solo performance 12 years earlier at age 5. 2 rousing reviews, I might add. So I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. I decided I love to make people laugh. I love to laugh myself. I'm just a funny kind of guy. That's it. So I started trying to write down comedy material and put together comedy routines and stuff like that, and I realized that's a lot of work. Not only is it a lot of work, but I was kind of scared to test it out on anybody. So at about age 19, I decided, wait a minute, I've been doing all this advanced placement art in high school, Disney has resurged in its animation studios. I know what I want to do with the rest of my life. I'm going to be a Disney animator. What better thing for someone who enjoys childish type fantasies? And I love animation, I love cartoons, I love Disney, I love art, I am an artist. Hey, Disney animator, that's what I'm going to do. So I even looked up and found the art school where they got a lot of them in Sarasota, Florida, where they did a lot of the training for the Disney animators. Sort of glad I didn't get into that, though, because I'm not into the computer side of things, and guess what happened very shortly after that? We started getting the implementation of Pixar and the digital animation and stuff like that, which there's still a need for animators and artists and stuff like that, but the true hand animation that I was thinking about, that was my final what I want to do when I grow up thing, just kind of went by the wayside, at least in the way that I was envisioning things. And that's okay, because at that time in my life, I met my wife and things dramatically changed. I wasn't wanting to move away. I wanted to be around her. And since Disney Animator didn't really pan out, a couple of years later, at age 21, right after I got married, my wife and I ended up in a musical review company, if you want to call it that. There were some talented people there. There were some not so talented people there. It was a local family who was trying to start something, and they really didn't have a whole lot of idea of what they were doing, and we got involved with it. But through that, we met a man who was the director of the review that we were doing. Well, not necessarily the director, but a consultant, because he had experience in the movie industry. Not only was consulting for this review organization we were a part of briefly, but he also held classes for film acting. And me and my wife took a film acting class with Warren. And all of a sudden, that was what we both knew we wanted to do. That's it. We are married, and we can do this together. And we are going to start at the bottom and work our way up. We're going to do some extra work. We're going to get ourselves agents, and we are going to be film actors. So at age 21, I had finally found what I was looking for. I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. Sorry, Bono. No. I thought I had, but at that time, I still hadn't found what I was looking for. Let's jump ahead a couple of years to about the age of, I'll say 23. I started getting that writing bug again. Like I said, I've always enjoyed writing, and doing compositions in school was one of my favorite things, and my teachers really tried to encourage me to write and to continue writing. They saw something in me that eventually I saw in myself and enjoyed writing. And I had begun reading everything I could possibly get my hands on by Stephen King. I was going to be a novelist. I had finally figured out what it is I was meant to do in this life. At age 23, I was going to be a novelist. I remember in the little small 2-bedroom apartment that my wife and I had right after we got married, well, a couple of years after we got married, I had an old desk that I had brought with me from when I moved away from the house. An old desk and one of the big clunky telephones. It was a push button telephone, not a turn dial, but it was still in that bell ringing shape, clunky telephone, and it was bright orange. And I brought it with me, and I set that desk and that telephone up and a typewriter in the spare bedroom and turned that bad boy into an office, and I decided I was going to write every single day of my life. And I was going to write so much content that eventually something had to sell. And as soon as something sold and I became published, I would start getting offers from other people. And I was going to make a living being a writer. Honey, I'm going to take care of us through writing. I finally figured out what it is I am meant to do. I am meant to be a writer at 23 years old. At 25, I decided I wanted to be a business owner. I don't know that I ever finished an article when I was writing, or at that time when I decided I was going to be a writer. But at about 25, I realized that I wanted to be in control of my own destiny career-wise. That underneath all of this other stuff, part of my problem was I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to be in control of it. And this is where things start rounding out to where I am today. Because although the ways I was going to do it have changed over the past few years, I knew finally, truly, for a fact that I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to be responsible for how much I made. I didn't want to answer to anybody but myself. And that has now happened, and it's one of the best things that has ever happened to me. But at the time, I just knew at about the age of 25 that I want to run my own company. I don't know what yet, but I want to run my own company. So we're going to jump ahead about 15 years to about age 40. Because from that, in that 15-year span, I was still a newlywed at 25, really. I got married at 21, but really I'd only been married 4 or 5 years. And we were just trying to make it. And the span of time between 25 and 40 was spent working, sleeping, working, sleeping, trying to make ends meet, trying to keep our head above the water, trying to support a family, having a baby, having a second baby, having a family, and just being a middle-class American. Maybe not even considered middle class at that time. We really struggled for a long time. And somewhere along the line, well, nowhere along the line, I got a job as an artist, as an etcher. And it clicked one day. I remember talking to my wife, sitting outside waiting for my family to meet us outside at SeaWorld in Orlando, Florida. A big storm was coming because we ended up getting soaking wet getting to our car that afternoon, right after Kayla and I talked about this. But I'd been thinking, I'd been etching for a while, and I realized that I had something, a niche that I could fill that nobody else was doing by traveling and doing etching on site with monument companies. And I thought I could make a go of it and be my own boss. And I asked her, sitting there on the bench, I think might have been the first time I brought it up. If not, it's the first really serious conversation I remember us having about it. I said, Kayla, what do you think? If I were to go out on my own and take etching to monument dealers, instead of making them have to have it done in Elberton, I can go there and have it done in front of them, and they can see the job before they pay for it and talk to their customers, blah, blah, blah. I won't go into all of that, but she thought it was a great idea. And I remember asking her while we were sitting there at SeaWorld if she would be okay with me traveling, because I said, it's going to require I travel, especially at the time I was going to work my way up to it. I was going to do my own business on the weekends, which meant I was going to be traveling on the weekends and still working for the company in Georgia that I was working for that taught me how to etch in the first place. I'd be working there during the week. So it was going to be a lot of time away. We were going to have to get used to it with me staying in hotels without my wife there with me, and this was something we weren't used to. So we talked about it, and she said that if it would improve our family, if it would improve our situation and help us to be able to make ends meet better, then, and if it was something that I really wanted to do, then she was behind me, and so I did. I took off on that dream, and I made that happen. I should say by the grace of God, because I don't want to take the glory away from Him. It was through His grace and mercy that I was able to do this. But so far, so good with it. And that's what I've done since 2008. And so we're going to jump ahead to the age of 39, 40 years old, all the way back around to writer. And a friend of mine who was in high school asked me for permission to use a scene from a play I'd told him that I was writing in a literary competition, and I told him that I actually had not written any dialogue or scenes, that the play was all in my head. He got on to me about it and said, if you're not writing a play, if it's not written down, you're not writing anything, Michael. You need to write this. So from that moment on, I decided I was going to do something different in my life. Instead of talking about things that I was going to do, things that I would like to do, starting things and not finishing them, I was going to make a decision. I was going to start something and finish it to completion, for good or for bad. So that's exactly what happened. From that moment on, I began writing Mr. Long Said Nothing. And I finished that play, saw it produced, got to direct it with a full cast and a full inaugural run. Can call myself a playwright. I've finished 2 plays now. 3, actually, if you count the dialogue on a third one I finished a while back, but it's a musical that needs a whole lot of work. And it's got some reboot stuff that's happening with it, so I don't really consider myself finished with it. But that's really it in a nutshell. That's where I've gone from 7 years old all the way into my 40s. I've settled on I'm a playwright and an entrepreneur. I run my own company. I have some new programs and products that are hopefully going to be in place here very soon that I've been talking about for a long time, but with the research and development, they're just now getting underway, where I'm getting ready to I'm starting to see little waves here and there of customers that know, hey, you do this, don't you? You do this, and I can add it as an extra to what I do already and build my business and grow it that way. But I went from stuntman to business owner and playwright, regular Joe Blow who has a podcast while I'm driving. And I enjoy it. I really enjoy life. I really enjoy what's going on. That's one thing that I've noticed. Life is so much better when I just sit back and say, I enjoy what I do. I like what I do. I'm not looking to get rich. I wouldn't turn it down, but I love what I do, and it makes ends meet, and my family's happy, and I'm able to provide. And I'm able to do the other things that I enjoy. I didn't mention the theater and things like that. Those are all hobbies, but those aren't things that I want to do when I grow up, because I'm still not a grown-up. At 40-plus years old, I don't feel like a grown-up. But hobbies are different. I had to come to the realization that theater for me, right now at least, is a hobby, and that's really okay with me. I'm a playwright, and if somebody sees one of my plays and decides they want to buy it or produce it, and it changes my life and puts it into a different direction, that's okay too. I would love that, because my heart is with the theater. But if I retire from etching, I'm okay with that too. And so doing this young man's stone this afternoon made me wonder. He was young. I really don't know exactly how old he was, but early 20s when he passed. I don't know how. I think it might have been fairly tragically. But I wonder where he would have been 20 years from now. If he was in his early 20s when he died, where would he be when he was at 40-plus years, and how much would his life have changed? When you do the type of thing that I do, you realize in so many different ways, on so many different levels, just how fleeting life is, and just how one idea, 1 second, can change in the next. So I try to use those experiences and those thoughts that go through my mind and things like this when I think, How have I changed in ideals from a child all the way up to where I am now through early adulthood, teenagerdom. I should really say teenagerdom, because I did some dumb stuff when I was a teenager. Don't we all? It's just really neat to think back as I get to this time of life, and I think back on my life, how fast it has gone, and how much it has changed, and how different things in my life, experiences that I've had, situations that I've come across, they've changed me. They molded me. If something had not happened a certain way, how different would I be now as a result of it? And to wax spiritual, that's why I want my life to be in the hands of God. That's why I'm glad my life is firmly in the hands of God. I give my life to Him, because whatever happens in my life, whether my flesh wants to deem it good or bad, if it's in God's plan, I consider it for the good. And I know that the things that go on in my life that make me who I am, or the things that go on in my life that are stumbling blocks or trials that I'm going through, thorns in my side, if you will, those are all things that are just going to make me stronger. They're things that are going to mold my character. And who knows that whatever's going on in my life right now, who knows other than God just how that's going to change my life in the days to come. It's a neat thought. It's a mystery. It's something we can't know. And it gets me excited to wonder what God's got in store for me each and every day that I wake up. And I think I'm going to start making that part of my prayer as I wake up in the morning, and I just say hello to God again as I'm conscious, in control of my thoughts, or at least as in control as I can be of my thoughts. And I say, hey, God, good morning. Thank you for a breath of life. I think I want to add to that, thank you for the mystery. Thank you for the excitement. Thank you for the journey that I'm going to be on. Now, that's all I've got for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to listen to more, just look for the back episodes and keep listening. I'm going to be trying to release this once a week. As I commute, pray for me along the road, that I would have a godly spirit, a godly mind, that although no man is righteous, no, not one, that we do strive towards that, though, and do the best that we possibly can. Always looking upward towards the heavens and towards Christ, who is our Savior. Until next time, right now I've really got to go to the bathroom, so I'm glad this is being wrapped up. I'm Mike Blackston. Thanks for listening. This is Road Noise. If you'd like to get in touch with me, here's how you can do it. I've got a hotline number, 706-389-0401. That's 706-389-0401. Just make sure you reference the Road Noise Podcast, roadnoisepodcast@gmail.com. That's the Road Noise Podcast @gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. If you feel like you'd like to help me out a little bit in the rankings in iTunes, you can run over there to iTunes and give me a review. Make it honest. I'm not asking for you to lie. But if you like the show, give us a review. And until next time, we'll see you. I'm Mike Blackston. Thanks for riding along with me in the passenger seat. This is Road Noise. Life, 1 mile at a time.